When we are playing any of our RPGs, watching shows, reading books, you often come across a band of heroes, or you get to make your own, that prescribe themselves to a very specific individual role within a group. And it's been this way for a very long time, and it's been done for so long that while I would love to do a historical deep dive into it, it's kind of just how fantasy has been written for ages, how games have been developed, and what the human psyche finds to be perfect when trying to optimize anything. It's often called the RPG trinity because it is just a triangle that also semi-works as a slider. You have your tank, your DPS, and your healer, now more commonly called a support. It's a very self-explanatory thing at first. You have a tank who is a big wall that's meant to get the crap beat out of them, the DPS, or damage per second for all you non-gamers out there, who is meant to make whatever the bad thing is go away, and the healer, now more who is meant to take care of the team, make sure no one dies, and overall just enable the other two roles to do what they need to do. It works out with the 5-man band literary trope. Read on Overly Sarcastic Productions is a great video on that if you want to know more. We see it in our MMOs, often the ideal composition being every group, regardless of size, having a tank, a healer, and the rest of the slots being filled with DPS. And even in our tabletop RPGs, we see it as more or less self-assigned roles as the story goes on, regardless of what the starting class distribution is. If we're taking D&D 5e as an example, how I would structure the trifecta would look a little something like this. Fighters and barbarians near the top, rogues and rangers bridging the opposite walls, wizards and sorcerers are opposing each other, clerics and druids are on this corner opposing each other, warlocks and artificers are somewhere over here, and paladins and bards are in the middle, but kind of opposite of each other in the middle, if that makes any sense. Now let's say, in your typical RPG with a group of 3, we have a fighter, a rogue, and a priest. Yep, that works. That fits. That's pretty standard. What about a fighter, a barbarian, and a priest? Well, that can still work. But what if we did a wizard, a rogue, and a priest? That's a bit weirder. 3 priests? 3 rogues? Whenever we take away the obvious role assignment that a lot of classes get, the default assignment now falls to the players. And this isn't a case where anyone is forcing the players to make a choice or stick with a party comp that they don't want to, but in my personal experience and observation, it often falls that someone will inevitably fall back to taking up the mantle by necessity. Let's take the 3 rogues, for example. If we have 3 rogues, I'm just gonna slap down a giant. Let's say a giant, big boy, lots of health. Odds are the rogues will get a single turn to do a bunch of damage and maybe even win. But if they don't win off the rip, well, that didn't go well for them. But let's say one rogue grabbed their crossbow, another prepared some traps, and the final one focused on just dodging and keeping the giant's attention, and giving the other 2 space to hurt and damage the giant. The fight would likely go longer, a little bit longer than if they all were able to just jump and slice his throat all at the same time. But in this scenario, it's more likely the poor sap who's just up front is going to be the one taking the most damage. Now, obviously, they're not locked in that role. Any of them could swap around and do what they want day by day, but they may also like their slot and begin building and equipping their characters to be able to perform better in their most commonly assigned role. And no matter how I've seen players in my own games and stories try to mix up the status quo with the unique party comps, they always tend to devolve into the same trifecta, and it's really interesting how common it is. I've had parties of wizards, warlocks, bards, fighters, barbarians, druids, all the classic archetypes of characters. Hell, even in one game when I ran it sci-fi, they were all hackers. It still kind of came down to the gist of you get hit, you stop us from getting hit mentality. I think it's just part of what makes humans versatile in a way. We naturally want to dedicate ourselves to a single purpose and know what our role is within a group dynamic. We instinctively try to see gaps in our plans and our groups and what makes us weaker and try to fill that missing link for the betterment of the group. It's part of what has made humans so willing and ready to band together and make teams. Overall, I don't think it's something you can escape from necessarily. It's been tried many, many times, and especially now as the concept of the trifecta has become more and more obvious to the public eye, we're seeing more and more people try to break out of it, yet stumble back in, for a desperate chance of being the ones to break a cycle, to be some sort of new, fresh, a pioneer of the new meta for what these teams will inevitably develop into. I, for one, don't think it's necessary. I think understanding how these things develop and getting to look at your favorite games and tropes under the lens kind of lets you see how connected a consciousness makes us when we're approaching group problems. We want to be part of the solution. Now, if the solution is us getting smacked by a giant, I guess it's just gonna how it be. So whenever you are in your next game and you see that the party is all wizards, don't stress it. Don't worry. You're gonna figure it out. You're gonna be able to pull through. The DM is not going to immediately shunt you all into an anti-magic field and then kill all of you in a horrible, gruesome way by, like, I don't know, maggot crawlers or something. I don't know. At least I wouldn't as a DM. You will inevitably be able to come over it. One of you will likely delve into abjuration to protect everyone. One of you will likely become an enchanter or an illusionist to distract enemies. And of course, someone has to drop the fireball.